Chapter 2, Part 1. The journey begins. The wind howled across the barren landscape as Tomasz stepped cautiously out of the half-collapsed barn. His breath, visible in the cold air, formed small clouds that dissipated quickly. The snow had stopped falling for now, but the earth remained crusted with ice and dirt, a constant reminder of the world that had withered away. His father, a once strong man now frail with age, followed slowly behind him. Maja walked close by, her face still etched with the ghost of the violence they'd witnessed. They had not spoken much since the attack. What words could they offer? They were all bound by the same raw, jagged grief. Tomasz for his lost family, Maja for the life she'd been robbed of, and his father for the death of his daughter and grandchildren. Tomasz tightened his grip on the worn rifle slung across his back. The weapons they had salvaged from the farmstead felt heavy in his hands, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. There was no one left to protect them except themselves, and every step forward felt like a step into the unknown. The sun was a pale smudge in the sky, barely breaking through the heavy clouds. The landscape before them was desolate. Fields once lush with crops now lay fallow, the remains of abandoned homes scattered like broken dreams. Nature had begun to reclaim what humanity had left behind, creeping into the foundations of old structures, twisting trees growing through roofs, vines curling up rusted metal. It wasn't much of a world to return to, but it was all they had now. Tomasz glanced at Maja. She walked silently, her eyes downcast. She hadn't said a word since they left the barn. He could feel her presence, heavy but distant. They were both trapped in their own personal storms, bound by tragedy but unable to fully reach each other. He wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His father, slower than the others, cleared his throat. "We can't keep going like this, Tomasz. We need to rest." Tomasz nodded, though he knew they couldn't afford to linger. Every day they stayed in one place, the chances of being found grew. There were still people out there, scavengers, worse, people who would stop at nothing to take what little they had. They needed to move. "Let's make it to the next village," Tomasz said, his voice hoarse from the cold and fatigue. "We can find shelter there." They trudged on, the wind biting at their faces, until they reached a stretch of road that was barely visible through the dust and ash. It was strange, how quiet it had become. There had been a time when this road had been alive with traffic, people going about their business, the hum of life in the distance. But now, it felt more like a graveyard than a path. As they moved forward, Tomasz's mind drifted. He didn't know if it was the weariness, the hunger, or just the endless weight of loss, but memories came rushing back in flashes, fragments of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. He saw Anya standing in the kitchen, laughing as Kasia and Maja ran circles around her, chasing each other between the tables. Tomasz had just returned from the fields, his arms aching from hours of work, but it didn't matter. In that moment, everything had felt whole. The world had felt whole. Then the memories shifted, taking him to the night of the first attack, the night everything had unraveled. The sound of glass shattering, the screams of his children, the desperate clamor for safety. Tomasz had fought like a man possessed, but even his military training hadn't been enough to save them. He had watched his family torn apart, the blood staining the floor, the shadows of their killers stretching long across the walls. His chest tightened, and for a moment, the world around him blurred. "Stop," Tomasz whispered to himself. He couldn't afford to go down that road again, not now. He had to keep moving. He had to survive. They had to survive. Maja, noticing his faltering step, looked up at him with eyes that seemed too old for someone so young. She said nothing, but in that look, there was an understanding. She, too, carried the weight of a past that refused to let go. The road stretched ahead, endless and uncertain, but they had no choice but to walk it. Chapter 2, Part 2. The Hungry Kind. They found shelter just before dusk in the ruins of what had once been a small tractor workshop. Rusted out frames leaned against broken walls, and the smell of oil still clung stubbornly to the earth despite decades of wind and decay. The place offered no warmth, but it offered walls and a roof, more than most. Inside, Tomasz scouted the rooms with careful steps, his rifle raised as he swept corners, eyes always scanning. His father sat down with a grunt, rubbing his knees, while Maja lingered near the door, looking out at the falling light with hollow eyes. They ate cold lentils from a tin Tomasz had found in the glove box of a dead man's car 2 days ago. His father chewed without comment. Maja tried to eat, but barely touched the food. Tomasz broke the silence. "You'll need energy. It's not going to get easier." Maja didn't argue, just forced a mouthful down. After a pause, she muttered, "Tastes like cat piss." Tomasz blinked at her. "You've eaten cat piss?" A ghost of a smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. "No, but I can imagine." His father chuckled dryly. like gravel sliding downhill. It wasn't joy, just the reflex of an old man remembering what it felt like to laugh. They slept in shifts, but it didn't matter. Sleep no longer brought peace. When Tomasz finally dozed, he saw fire again. Blood on the tiles, Anya's hand twitching. He woke to the sound of wind and the dull pain in his jaw from clenching it too hard. By mid-morning the next day, they were moving again. The road ahead was cracked and split, weeds pushing through where civilization had once reigned. Tomasz scanned the tree line as they walked. Birds had returned, but not people. That, in itself, was suspicious. It happened fast. A figure broke from the trees on their left, followed by another. A man and a teenage boy, both gaunt, eyes sunken from hunger. The man shouted something indecipherable and raised a broken hunting rifle. The boy carried a metal pipe. Their steps were desperate, frantic. "Drop it," Tomasz roared, already aiming. "Just leave." But desperation makes people deaf. The man fired, wide, the bullet tearing into a tree well above their heads. The boy charged forward, swinging his pipe. Tomasz reacted without thinking. 2 quick shots. The man dropped instantly. The boy stumbled forward, screaming, not in rage, but in sheer panic. Before Tomasz could shout again, his father had fired once. The boy fell, pipe clattering against the pavement. Silence. Maja gasped. She had fallen, her legs scraped and bleeding from diving out of the way. Nothing deep, just skin and dirt. But Tomasz was at her side immediately, dropping to one knee, hands already checking her over. "Let me see. You're okay." "It's not deep," he said gently. "Look at me. You're okay." She looked at him, not crying, not panicking, just stunned. "I didn't see them. I was watching the trees." "It's not your fault," he said, already pulling a small bottle of antiseptic from his pack. "You did everything right." He cleaned the wound with steady hands, even as his own fingers trembled slightly. She winced but said nothing. His father stood a few meters away, watching the 2 bodies without a word. After wrapping Maja's leg in gauze, Tomasz stood. He looked at the fallen man and boy for a long moment. "He was just a father," he said, voice hollow. "Just trying to feed his son." His father nodded slowly. "Doesn't make it less necessary. But yeah, it's still sad." Tomasz exhaled through his nose. "We didn't win. We just survived." They searched the bodies. A few dried mushrooms in a cloth pouch. 1 rusty knife. No ammo. No food beyond the fungus. Just 2 starving people who'd run out of choices. Maja limped slightly but said nothing as they moved on. Her eyes were harder now, more focused. Tomasz watched her when she wasn't looking, checked her pace, her breathing, made sure she didn't push too hard. She was tougher than he'd expected, but still just a kid. That night, as they camped inside the hollow shell of a shipping container, Tomasz sat up long after the others had drifted to sleep. His thoughts were not of guilt or sorrow, but of how quickly the human mind could adapt. How fast a man could go from building a swing set for his daughters to shooting a father in the chest. He looked over at Maja. She stirred in her sleep, one hand twitching as if chasing something in a dream. "I'm still a father too," he whispered to no one. And outside, the wind carried the weight of a world that had long stopped caring. Chapter 2, Part 3, Ghosts in the Circuit. The rain came down in a sheet so thick it blurred the horizon. The kind of rain that muffled everything. Their footsteps, the birds, the distant rustle of animals they hoped weren't people. The group moved quickly, coats pulled tight, gear wrapped in plastic. They spotted the structure around midday, a small prefab research station, half sunken into the muddy earth. Solar panels still clung to the roof at odd angles, and green moss streaked the walls like nature's slow vengeance. It was military tech, mid-century build, likely abandoned during the border collapses. Tomasz's breath caught. "That's not junk." His father gave a low whistle. "Could be loaded. Or booby-trapped," Maja muttered, still limping slightly from the scrape 2 days prior. He smiled faintly. "We'll knock first." Inside, it smelled like ozone and dust. The station was dry, mostly intact. Terminals still blinked faintly on backup cells. It hadn't been raided, either too hidden, or too risky. Tomasz's fingers danced across the interface, surprised when it responded. His childhood came back in flashes, training simulations, command drills, interfaces like this one lit under dim lights with commanding voices overhead. "Still online," he murmured. "Partially, at least." In a back room, they found it. A medical nanokit. Encased in reinforced glass, it looked almost untouched, like a relic from a better world. The kind used in emergency triage centers or high-risk military ops. Tomasz opened the case and saw the glow of active nanos. Programmable cells, billions of them. Enough to patch a lung, stop internal bleeding, fight infection in seconds. This alone is worth more than half the farms in Denmark, his father said quietly. More if the right people know we have it, Tomasz replied. But it's heavy. Powered case, redundant backups, thermal regulation. He trailed off. They all knew what came next. Maja sat on an overturned chair, staring at it like it might vanish if she blinked. We could carry it, she said. Tomasz shook his head. Not with the food. Not with our pace. It weighs 20 kilos. That slows us. Makes us targets. Then why not use it? She asked. On me, maybe. The leg? It's not meant for scratches, Tomasz said gently. This is life-saving tech. Once we open it, the nanos expire within days unless kept in that core. We'd waste it. She looked away, jaw clenched. They argued for half an hour. Logistics, weight, priorities. They could try to bury it, mark it, come back later, but Tomasz knew that was fantasy. He'd buried hope before. It didn't age well. In the end, they left it on the table, wrapped in a tarpaulin. Tomasz paused before exiting, then picked up the marker from the control panel and wrote on the wall above the kit. Used by good people or none at all. T. It wasn't a prayer, just a wish. Outside, the rain was lighter. The world seemed to mock them for doing the right thing. They walked in silence for hours after that. Even Maja didn't speak. Her leg hurt, but she didn't limp anymore. Not out of recovery, but defiance. She didn't want Tomasz to carry her. Not when they'd left behind something that could have saved lives. Later that evening, as they camped under the leaning shell of a rusted signpost, once a McDonald's, now just scrap, Maja finally broke the quiet. That thing. It could have fixed me. Tomasz nodded. Yes. But you didn't use it. No. Because it wasn't bad enough? He met her eyes. Because we might still face something worse. She looked at him for a long time, the firelight playing on her face. You think I'm going to get hurt worse? I think we all might. A pause. That sucks, she said. He smiled faintly. Yeah. His father snorted from under his blanket. Sleep. Tomorrow we climb. Less whining, more walking. Tomasz lay back, looking at the stars for the first time in days. Between them and Denmark, 100 dangers still waited. But so did the people they'd left behind. Maybe even redemption. For now, they had fire. They had each other. And they had chosen to walk away from something powerful. Not out of weakness, but out of brutal, necessary logic. In 2064, survival was rarely clean. But that didn't mean they had to be monsters. Chapter 2, Part 4. Hungry eyes, heavy hands. The fog hung low the next morning, shrouding the countryside in a dense, colorless veil. Trees loomed like ghosts, their branches skeletal and dripping. The road had long since crumbled into gravel and dirt, winding through the forest like a memory of civilization. Tomasz walked at the front, rifle slung, scanning ahead. Maja limped behind him, quieter than usual. She hadn't complained about her leg. He hadn't asked. They saw the boy first. Thin, maybe 10 or 11. Dirty hoodie, too small. He stood in the road like a scarecrow, arms loose at his sides, eyes wide. Tomasz raised a hand, slowing the others. His father came up beside him, scanning the trees. It felt wrong immediately. Too exposed. Too still. Then the man appeared. From the trees on the right, big, maybe 40, with the look of someone who'd run out of good options long ago. His hands held a long metal rod, broken pipe, sharpened. He didn't yell, just moved, fast. Tomasz barely brought his weapon up before the man lunged. His father caught the attacker's shoulder, both men tumbling in the mud. The boy ran, or maybe just vanished into the brush. Maja shouted something. Then came the sound of bone striking metal. It lasted 20 seconds. When it ended, the man lay face down, unmoving. Tomasz's father stood over him, panting, pipe in hand. Blood pooled into the mud. Tomasz turned. Maja sat on the ground, holding her arm. Torn sleeve. A clean cut down her forearm, not deep but angry looking. You okay? She nodded once. Was helping. He had a knife. Tomasz knelt beside her and examined the wound. You did help. You were brave. She looked away. Doesn't feel brave. Feels like shit. He cleaned the cut with a stinging antiseptic, wrapping it gently. That's normal. Courage isn't clean. They found the boy again a mile later, hiding behind a collapsed barn. Starved, shaking, crying. The pipe was gone. Tomasz didn't shoot. Neither did his father. The boy didn't speak, just stared at the rifle and didn't move as they passed. They made camp in a burned-out roadside station that night. The shelves were bare, graffiti scrawled across the walls in 3 languages. One line caught Tomasz's eye. Mercy will kill you. His father sat near the door, carving dried meat with a pocketknife. Maja sat with a blanket over her shoulders, staring at the wall. Tomasz cooked, such as it was, powdered stew and thin bread. As he stirred, his father spoke softly. That man, he wasn't evil. No. He was just done. Tomasz nodded. Starving. Out of choices. His father looked at the fire. We still had one. We didn't want to, but we had to. Maja's voice came from the dark. Is that who we are now? People who kill starving dads? No, Tomasz said, gently. We're the people who are still here to ask the question. She didn't answer, but she moved closer to the fire. Tomasz handed her a bowl of the stew. She accepted it without a word. Her fingers trembled as she held it. Later, after his father slept, Tomasz checked her bandage again. Her skin was warm, the cut clean but red. Infection was always a risk. You trust me? He asked softly. Maja looked at him. Do I have a choice? Yes, he said. Always. She studied him for a long time. Then yeah, I do. He smiled, and something like warmth returned to his face. But as he turned away, he saw it again, graffitied behind the shelves, in red. Mercy will kill you. He wondered if it had been a warning. Or a confession. Chapter 2, Part 5. Rain without end. It rained again. Harder this time. A gray, relentless curtain that blurred the trees and turned the world into a cold drumbeat of falling water. The road narrowed into a forgotten strip of pavement choked with moss and broken glass. It wound around a cluster of hills where the bones of the old world jutted out, collapsed homes, rusting cars with their doors open like mouths frozen in a scream, and crooked signs pointing nowhere. Maja walked slowly, still favoring her leg. The rain soaked her coat and hair, but she didn't complain. She hadn't since the fight. Something in her had quieted, not broken, but hardened. Tomasz glanced back at her often. He didn't hover, but she always caught him watching, checking. When their eyes met, he'd nod slightly. She never returned the gesture, but she saw it. His father, Jacek, walked ahead, quiet as usual, rifle cradled in both arms. Tomasz remembered the stories from the early collapse, back before they moved to Poland. Jacek had seen worse than this. Maybe that's why nothing seemed to shake him, or maybe he was just good at pretending. They crossed a flooded stream mid-morning, using a fallen tree as a makeshift bridge. Below, in the current, they saw the wreck of an old military drone half submerged, its casing split open and tangled in roots. Tomasz crouched beside it. He reached in and pulled free a panel, thin but dense. Titanium composite, he muttered. Jacek shook his head. Too heavy. No use dragging junk. It's not junk. This is grade 3 shielding. We could plate the water containers. Maja stepped beside them, brushing wet hair from her eyes. You said we can't carry more weight. I know. Jacek gave him a long look. You want to take it, you leave something behind. They stared at the wreck a little longer. Then Tomasz stood. Let's move. He left the panel in the mud. They stopped that afternoon under the skeletal canopy of an old roadside restaurant, its roof caved in and covered with black moss. Inside, the booths were still there, sagging under time and moisture. A rotted menu board still offered cheeseburger, 99. Maja stared at it. You ever had one? A cheeseburger? Tomasz asked. Yeah, he smiled faintly. Once, when I was little, my sister got mad because I ate hers too. What was it like? Salty. Wet. Too much mustard. Perfect. She nodded and sat down in the booth across from him. I think I would have liked that. They shared dried fruit and boiled rainwater in silence. The wind howled through the cracked windows like a feral animal, and the rain came down harder, now mixed with sleet. Tomasz lit a heat tab. It flickered blue against the shadows. You okay? He asked her. Maja nodded. Legs stiff, that's all. He pulled out a small bottle of warmed antiseptic and crouched beside her. Let me see. She peeled the bandage back. The cut had closed, but the skin was pink and slightly inflamed. We'll clean it again in the morning. It's healing. Maja looked down. You always do this? What? Take care of people. He paused. Not always, just the ones who need it. She blinked slowly, staring at the cracked table between them. Thanks for not leaving me. Tomasz didn't respond right away. The wind rattled the building again, and somewhere outside, a distant bird gave a lonely, ragged cry. Then he said softly, That's not who we are. That night they slept in shifts. Tomasz took the second watch. Rain pounded the broken windows, and the shadows in the restaurant shifted like the ghosts of customers long gone. He stared out at the road, the drone wreck, the panel he left behind, the boy in the barn, the slaver he'd killed. So many ghosts. He thought of something his mother used to say. Rain always sounds worse when you're alone. He looked back at the sleeping forms, his father near the fire, Maja curled in a blanket beside the ruined booth. She twitched slightly, caught in a dream. He wasn't alone. But somehow, the rain still sounded like grief. Chapter 2, Part 6, Quiet Power, Louder Shadows. By some miracle, or oversight, the power still worked. The outpost stood at the edge of a pine forest, concrete walls stained with age, half its exterior hidden behind thick moss and creeping vines. A solar panel array tilted lazily on the roof, one cell cracked but most intact. Beneath it, a low hum vibrated from inside. Steady, warm, alive. Tomasz stepped cautiously through the rusted entrance, rifle raised. Jacek followed silently, his own eyes scanning the corners. Maja stayed outside for now, leaning on her walking stick, watching the trees. Inside, clean enough, dry. One working LED strip flickered to life overhead, casting cold light across metal lockers, a broken desk, and a dusty medical cot. A single solar battery pack, the size of a backpack, sat mounted on the wall, blinking green. Grid tied back up, Tomasz whispered. Still charging. Jacek lowered his rifle. We stay. One night. Tomasz didn't argue. The warmth of the solar-heated radiator hit harder than expected. It brought a strange kind of guilt. Comfort felt borrowed now, like wearing someone else's coat while your house burned down. Maja found a stash of protein wafers in a sealed tin. They were dry and tasteless, but didn't taste like dirt, so they were an upgrade. Try these, she said, tossing one to Tomasz. He caught it mid-air. God, haven't had a space biscuit in years. They're awful. Yeah, but they make you feel like a cosmonaut in a fallout bunker. Real classy stuff. Maja smirked, only missing the vodka and nuclear fire. Later, Tomasz found a terminal in the corner of the room. He flipped the switch. The screen blinked and showed a weather log, last updated 3 days ago. Which meant someone had been here. His stomach twisted. He checked the door again, locked it, reinforced the bottom with a metal bin, then stood there in the dark for a long time, listening. Nothing. Just wind, trees, the electric hum of borrowed light. He sat alone for a while, watching the heater. Its glow cast long shadows on the walls, stretching and shifting with every flicker. And then, unexpected, uninvited, a memory broke through. Breakfast, 2 years ago. His wife had been pouring tea, humming tunelessly. The kids were still in pajamas, bickering over who got more honey in their porridge. Maja, his daughter Maja, not the girl in the other room, had giggled with a spoon in her mouth, cheeks puffed like a chipmunk. He'd snapped a picture that morning. He still had it, stored on an old slate, battery long dead. The way his wife's hair had glowed in the morning light, it hit him hardest. Not the faces, not even the laughter, just that golden light through her hair. And then came the crash. The door kicked in. Screaming. The smell of blood and wet wool. He slammed the memory shut like a drawer full of knives. Outside, it started to rain again. Softer this time. Jacek returned from scouting the perimeter. Tracks, he said. Not old. Single person. Boots. Maybe 5 days out. Tomasz rubbed his face. Coming or going? Hard to say. He glanced toward Maja, who was curled in a blanket near the heater, her face slack with sleep, hair still damp. We'll move before sunrise, Tomasz said. Jacek nodded. Before bedding down, Tomasz explored a bit more. In the far back room he found a water purifier still hooked up to a rain catch system. The filter light glowed blue. Clean water. A miracle. He twisted the tap and filled 2 bottles. As the last drops fell, he noticed a bundle slumped in the far corner. A figure, wrapped in an old blanket, skin like parchment, eyes closed. He stepped closer. Dead. Long dead. A woman, maybe 50. She'd died sitting up, arms wrapped around her ribs. A cup sat near her feet, still half full. Tomasz didn't touch anything, just stood there a moment. Hope and despair, in one room. That night, he slept with his rifle across his chest and the memory of golden morning light behind his eyes. Chapter 2, Part 7, Still Breathing. They moved before sunrise, as planned. The trees stood like sentries in the early gray, their needles dripping with mist. No birds, no deer, only their crunching footsteps in last autumn's deadfall and the occasional click of Tomasz's rifle strap knocking against his hip. The air had the taste of metal, cold and charged. Somewhere, thunder rolled over the hills, low and slow like a beast waking in the dark. Maja walked quietly, slower than usual but not limping. The scratch on her leg had scabbed nicely, thanks to Tomasz's careful tending and the last of their antiseptic. She glanced up at him once as he adjusted the strap on her pack, the silent kind of thanks only the hurt know how to give. He just nodded. They passed a burned-out vehicle along the roadside, Some kind of old fuel cell delivery truck, scavenged clean, its wheels removed, frame warped from a fire, but beside it lay something newer. A case. Long, matte black, half buried in a drift of pine needles and ash. Tomasz pried it open. Inside, a collapsible drone. Sleek, military-grade, still intact. He looked it over, folded rotors, encrypted ports, its frame marked with serials and tags from a Scandinavian defense lab. Could fly it, Jacek said. Scout ahead. Spot danger. Too loud, Tomasz muttered. We fly that, and every scavenger, militia, or slaver with a scope hears us coming. But still, it works. Exactly. Tomasz closed the lid and stood. Someone will come for it, or come back for it. It's bait, or worse. Jacek looked disappointed, but he didn't argue. They left it behind, and kept walking. By midday the path turned rough again, dense bramble and thornbrush growing wild along what used to be a bike trail, the kind of growth that whispered no one's been through here in years. But that didn't mean safe. Tomasz's nerves frayed at the edges now. Every snapped twig, every gust through the trees, sent his hand to the trigger. He felt eyes, even when there were none. His instincts were useful, but lately they were getting louder than his logic. Might be trauma, might be survival. Could be both. When they stopped to rest, Maja pulled off her boots and rubbed her ankle, wincing slightly. You sure it's okay? Tomasz asked, crouching beside her. I'm fine. Just pressure. I don't want to slow us down. You won't. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a soft wrap, one of the few medical bandages they had left. Without saying anything, he knelt and carefully began to rewrap the injury. She watched him in silence. You ever been a medic? She asked. No, he said, his hands steady. Just a father. Her lips tightened slightly, a ghost of pain behind her eyes. I remember mine. I was small when he died, but he had this way of making even a scraped knee feel like the end of the world, so he could fix it and be the hero. Tomasz gave a half smile, then fastened the wrap. You're still breathing, he said. That's enough heroics for one day. That night they camped beside a collapsed wind turbine. The once spinning Titan had fallen decades ago, split by rust and storm. Its blades lay scattered in the tall grass like the ribs of a sleeping god. They built a small fire in the hollow where the generator once stood. Hidden from view, contained. Maja leaned against Tomasz's side as sleep took her slowly. Jacek sat across from them, silently cleaning his knife. You think we'll make it? He asked, not looking up. Tomasz stared at the fire. To Denmark? No. Just, through this. Alive. Whole. A long silence followed. Finally. I don't know, Tomasz said. He didn't lie. Not anymore. Tomorrow, they'd cross into more dangerous territory, regions with fewer maps, fewer names, and more eyes watching from the dark. But tonight, the wind was calm. And they were still breathing. Chapter 2, Part 8, The Old Border. The rain had returned, a soft but relentless curtain that blurred the landscape into smudges of green and gray. It didn't soak so much as cling, mist becoming sweat, fog seeping into bone. The group walked silently along a shattered asphalt path that had once been a back road. Trees crowded close now. Civilization had long since stopped maintaining the line between forest and road. But this road once led to a border. Tomasz remembered it clearly. Though the guardhouses had been abandoned decades ago, the place still held weight. He had crossed here as a soldier. Crossed again, years later, with his family, when they'd left Denmark behind in hope of a new beginning. A quieter life. Now he returned not with hope, but ghosts. He saw it first. A skeletal building, 2 stories tall, choked in vines, its windows blown out, its roof half collapsed. Once a customs office. Now, a nest for birds, a haven for rats, and behind it, where the old metal fence used to stand, something new. Towers. Massive structures of black composite and steel. 8 of them stretched across the horizon in jagged intervals, like broken teeth. They were crude but tall, easily 5 stories, and each was mounted with dead searchlights and collapsed antenna dishes. Cranes must have hoisted them years ago, built from salvaged city steel and whatever welding tech could be found. And all of it left behind. Abandoned. 18 years ago. God, Jacek whispered. They built these to keep people out? No, Tomasz said, voice low. To keep people in, before they realized no one was coming to save them. They stepped over what remained of a barbed wire barrier, the ground stained with rusted fragments and old plastic sheeting. On the far side, cracked pavement gave way to a vast gravel lot, half-eaten by weeds. At the center of it stood a rusted checkpoint booth. Tomasz approached it, slowly. He placed his hand on the peeling doorframe. His breath caught in his throat. There was a child's drawing still taped inside. Faded. Water. Warped. Stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Papa written in block letters. Below it, a list of shift hours, scrawled in a dying pen. He stepped back, shook his head, eyes glassy. "I used to think the world could still fix itself," he said softly. "Even after everything. After the cities fell. After the first famines. The riots. Thought maybe, just maybe, we'd remember how to be better. But this?" He pointed toward the towers. "This wasn't protection. It was fear turned inward. It was us, trying to build walls instead of futures." No one spoke. Maja moved beside him, her eyes scanning the towers. She looked small, wrapped in her ragged coat, her breath puffing white in the cold. A drizzle ran down her face, indistinguishable from tears. "I wonder if my parents ever came here," she said quietly. "To the other side. Before they sold me. Maybe they thought this line still meant something." "It used to," Tomasz said. "But not anymore." They walked forward, crossing the threshold between what used to be Poland and what used to be Denmark. No guards. No signs. Just ghosts and ruins. On the other side, they found the remains of an old transport truck. The license plate had a Danish flag sticker, half scraped off. Inside were only rags and empty food tins. A bullet hole through the windshield. No bodies. Just evidence of the ones who had come this way before, and didn't make it. Tomasz climbed one of the towers. The steps groaned beneath his weight. At the top, a broken sensor array sagged like a broken neck. But the view stretched for kilometers. Forests, fields, the shapes of crumbled overpasses. And far in the distance, a blinking signal tower. One of the few still working, perhaps part of an old emergency network. They were close now. He stood there a long time, soaked and silent. Down below, Jacek started a small fire using the dry remnants of packaging foam they found in the booth. Maja sat close to it, rubbing her hands and staring into the flames like they held secrets. When Tomasz came down, his face had changed. Weathered, yes, but more than that. Something had set in behind his eyes. Resolve. Grief. Some strange hybrid of both. "We'll rest here tonight," he said. "Inside the checkpoint?" Jacek asked. Tomasz nodded. "It's symbolic." Jacek gave a dry laugh. "You're getting poetic in your old age." Tomasz gave a rare grin. "Age has earned me that right." That night, they slept surrounded by the bones of a dead system. Beneath the towers built to stop chaos, among the ruins of order. The fire crackled. The wind howled through the fence. And somewhere, a fox cried out. A high, broken sound that echoed into the dark. Maja dreamed of open fields, of a farmhouse, of the sound of her name being spoken gently, not shouted or barked or sold. She didn't know if it was a memory or a lie her mind had given her as a kindness. She didn't care. Tomasz sat awake. One hand on his rifle, the other resting on the old tin badge he'd found in the checkpoint booth, a Danish border patrol relic, bent and burned. He remembered what it felt like to believe in lines, in countries, in flags. Now he believed in people. His people. And for now, they were still alive. And still moving forward.